This podcast is made possible by the Chicago Institute for Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy and is powered by Podcastle. All right, welcome everyone to the first episode of the Rational Harm Reduction Podcast. My name is Jack Slimsky. I am a peer recovery support specialist. In a little bit, I will be joined by Kenneth Anderson, the founder, creator of HAMS, Harm Reduction for Alcohol. It's a support group for folks looking to make positive changes with their relationship with alcohol. The acronym stands for Harm Reduction, Abstinence, and Moderation Support. HAMS is one of the most open support groups for folks who are looking to make positive changes with alcohol. Whether you're looking to try and moderate, cut back, abstain, or you're just not sure about your relationship with alcohol, HAMS might be the right place for you. One reason that I kind of thought that this conversation was important, and why this podcast in general is important, is that a lot of people don't realize that they have as many options as they do. A lot of times when you realize you're having a problem with alcohol and you go in for some treatment or you're looking for help, the conventional wisdom or knowledge that you'll be approached with is that you either need to abstain completely or you're in denial. And there's not really a lot of wiggle room to figure it out. So showing people that they actually have options, like groups like HAMS, actually makes a huge difference. I know early in my recovery, it helped me make some positive changes. I now abstain from alcohol, but just knowing that these types of groups were out there and, it wasn't just this all or nothing type of decision made a big difference for me. Each week on this podcast, we're going to try and have either experts in harm reduction, people who work in the field or run organizations, or some individuals who want to come on and discuss some mental health issues that they're currently struggling with, and that they're looking for some guidance or direction on. We basically want to show folks that harm reduction can be applied to a broad range of mental health issues, not just addiction, which is what you commonly hear about it. We'll be using a psychoeducational framework from Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, formerly referred to as Rational Emotive Behavior Education. But REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, REBT as it's commonly called, was created by Dr. Albert Ellis in the 1950s. And it's largely based on the premise, the theory, that events in the world do not directly make you feel any certain way. Events in your life, things that happen in the world, things that happen to you, do not directly make you feel any type of emotion. It's more so your beliefs about those events that directly cause or create your emotions. It's also inherently a harm reduction approach because REBT doesn't aim at perfection. It aims more so at reducing the frequency, intensity, and duration of whatever you're working on. So even if it's depression, anxiety, symptoms of PTSD, we're not aiming at completely making sure you never, ever have those types of disturbances, but aiming at making them happen less often. And when they do happen, they're less intense and the duration is shorter. They don't last as long. So in that way, it's kind of inherently a harm reduction approach. But we'll get into that more and more in the coming episodes. But first, I'd like to, introduce our first guest, which is Kenneth Anderson, the founder of HAMS. So, without further ado, Kenneth, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so I'm been familiar with HAMS for a minute. I've been part of the Facebook group and stuff. I've never been to any of your support meetings personally, but been kind of a, I guess, silent observer in the Facebook group for a minute. So yeah, really like what you guys are doing. And I'd like to get into HAMS a little bit more, but first I'd like to just know a little bit about your personal background, how you got involved in, either the recovery field or harm reduction in general, and yeah, what kind of led to that?
Well, I was involved in moderation management back in about 1995 or 96. When I was living in Minneapolis, I was in a master's program. I wanted to finish my thesis. And, I was like drinking every night. And I said, I should like go down and drink one night a week. And then I can actually get this done because the way it's going, I just am not having enough time. I'm wasting all my time drinking and not getting anything done.
Right.
So, if Audrey Kishline was the founder of Moderation Management.
Right.
And the first meeting I went to in Minneapolis, she was living in Minneapolis at the time, and she was hosting the meeting, and I was the only participant. So yeah, I think it was 95 or 96, something like that. Um, so I said, my plan is to drink one night a week. I'm going to like drink a fifth of whiskey and then not drink the other day. So that's like 17 drinks. And MM had well, at least in those days, they had their very strict program of men are allowed to have 4 drinks in a day, and I think 12 in a week or 14 in a week, something like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And yeah, she's like, well, that's not moderate drinking. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's a lot better than getting drunk every night of the week.
Right.
So I was kind of in harm reduction from the get-go. Then I finished my thesis, got my degree, was out of school for a while, drinking a lot more again, and got in some troubles and said, okay, I need to go back to my old plan. So about 2002, I think I got involved with moderation management. Again, that was online. There weren't any live meetings in Minneapolis at that point. And as we all know, Audrey, in the year 2000, she resigned from moderation management, said she was going to AA because she hadn't been able to keep to the limits and she'd been lying to everybody. And then a couple of months after she resigned, she killed 2 people driving drunk, went to prison, with that whole business. But anyway, I was involved in moderation management online. I got very involved in the online group starting about 2002. And I was actually their coordinator of online services for a couple of years.
Nice.
And then we got a new executive director in 2006. Well, I should say, while I was doing the online services director thing, I was really talking a lot about harm reduction.
Mm.
And in fact, I started volunteering in the needle exchange program in Minneapolis at Access Works, which doesn't exist anymore, but that's what the name of it was then. Yeah, the local needle exchange got all these great harm reduction ideas, got totally exposed to this philosophy, which utterly changed my life, changed my point of view about everything in the world, about encouraging every positive change, no matter how small, um, be completely non-judgmental, thank people for making small changes. If you come in and get clean needles, you say, thank you for using clean needles. You're doing a really good thing. You don't say, do you think you want to get into treatment? Or no, you
Right.
wait. You wait until somebody comes forth themselves if they want to get into treatment. You just say, hey, thanks, you're doing a good thing. You're using clean needles. It's really good. And we really glad you're doing it because it helps stop the spread of disease. So, I got that whole philosophy. I was introducing that to MM at the time. And then in 2006, we got a new executive director. By then, I was living in New York City. And this new executive director said, we don't like harm reduction. We think everybody should go back to the strict program of X number of drinks per day and X number per week. The Audrey's program was the right thing. And you harm reduction people should get out. So we did, and we started HAMS.
That's so interesting because I would, just even hearing the word moderation, that is a harm reduction tool. So it's interesting that was kind of their that was their outlook.
Well, you see, that was 19 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, that was 2006. And we officially started HAMS in January of 2007. That's when we put up our website. And we got incorporated in August of 2007 and got our 501(c) a little later in that year. But that was then. This is now.
Right. Yeah.
Currently, moderation management has really adopted all of the harm reduction ideas that I was floating around in 2004, 2005.
Gotcha.
So now they're very much in tune with what we are. But 20 years ago, it was like, no, we don't do this. We have strict rules. We have a strict program that we have worked out. So what moderation management is doing in practice these days is much closer to HAMS than it was then.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, you kind of answered my second question as well about, kind of what led to the formation of HAMS. So appreciate that. You kind of put that in a nutshell for me. What are your kind of personal thoughts on, more traditional treatment and abstinence only treatment and the disease model of addiction and stuff like that? And does HAMS take any specific stances as an organization on any of these things, or how does that look?
Well, as to specific stances, not really. I used to be a lot more of people need to think the way I think, or they're wrong.
Gotcha.
But after many years of doing this, I just realized people need to make up their own minds about everything, and you need to respect people's decision, what they decided for themselves, and if I think differently than they think, that's fine. We don't have to fight about it. Some members of HAMS, the Facebook group, will say, I go to AA meetings, it helps me to moderate. Now, I don't understand that at all. It certainly wouldn't help me to moderate. But if that's working for you, go ahead and do it. Do whatever is helpful to you. As long as people in the group, we have kind of one of the rules we have is we encourage people to talk in the first person. Okay, this is what I did. This is what helped me. Tell your stuff. To avoid the second person. You need to do this. You ought to do that. You should do what I did. Yeah, that just is generally unhelpful and generally makes people say, so you're going to tell me what to do. Well, I'm going to do the opposite of what you tell me.
Right, exactly.
So
yeah, that's been my experience as well. When people kind of do it from a non-prescriptive, framing things as more of a suggestion rather than advice giving and speaking from your own personal experience, it's usually received quite a bit better.
Yeah, and you can get a lot of different suggestions that way. Person X says, I did this. Person Y says, I did that. And people did a lot of different things. And the person gets a lot the person asking the question gets a lot of different options to choose from, and they can say,
Right.
well, this one fits me. I'm going to try this. Or maybe if this doesn't work, I'll try that the other person suggested. So that's one of the things that we really encourage. One of the other rules we have, and we don't use derogatory, stigmatizing language. So we really don't let people use the word alcoholic or addict or alcoholism.
Mm.
And we took a vote on this because this is what we do in HAMS. Anytime there's an issue that people disagree on, we take a vote. We put up a poll, take a vote, and say, what does the majority want? And whatever the majority votes for, that's what we do, even if it's not what I wanted them to do.
Right, right.
So yeah, the majority voted, these stigmatizing terms should not be used here at all. So just don't use them. You can use them anywhere else you want to, but in our group, just avoid those words.
Right.
And if you want to talk about science, use the words in whatever scientific paper that you are citing.
Mm.
If the scientific paper says alcohol use disorder, that's the term you should use.
Right.
If it uses alcohol dependence, which is a different entity than alcohol use disorder, you should use that term.
Mm. Okay.
If you're talking about science, and then people say, well, if we can't call ourselves alcoholics, what should we call ourselves? And I said, we should call ourselves people who have chosen to change our drinking habits for the better.
That makes sense. I love that.
Or if you need something short, hamster. I called the first group Mods Abs HR because we support moderation, abstinence, and harm reduction. And one of our group members said, that's the worst name I've ever heard in my life. Here, why don't you make an acronym? Make harm reduction, abstinence, and moderation. Make it HAMS. And we'll all be hamsters. And I said, okay, that's good.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, kind of, in that same frame, or kind of flowing from that question, talking about stigmatizing language, what's your typical response, there are certain people who, whether they get it from AA, and most of it is from AA because it states it in the big book of AA. What's your typical response when people talk about the difference between a real alcoholic and a heavy drinker? As like, if someone's a real alcoholic, then they can't change their relationship. They can't moderate alcohol, or if they're able to moderate, then they must not be a real alcoholic. How do you have a typical response to that, or what do you usually say to that?
Well, if that comes up, it doesn't come up too often. But I just say, are you familiar with the no true Scotsman fallacy? Which is, the guy says, well, Scotsmen don't put salt on their porridge, or is it sugar? I forget.
Uh-huh.
There's sugar on their porridge. And the guy says, well, I put sugar on mine and I'm a Scotsman. And the answer is, well, no true Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge.
Mm,
It's the no true, you keep moving the goalposts.
right, right.
Um, but mostly that doesn't come up a lot.
Okay.
First, we don't use the term alcoholic. And as we wrote in our guidelines quite explicitly, it doesn't matter how much you drink or how little you drink. If you want to change your drinking habits, you're welcome here. And we also say, we are here to support you in whatever goal you choose for yourself. So if you want to stop, if you want to cut back, if you just want to be safer, stop drinking and driving, but still get drunk every day, whatever, it's up to
Right.
you. You choose your goal. We support you in your goal.
100%. Yeah, kind of, meet people where they're at, because when things are more prescribed or pushed on you, people are more likely to just turn around and head out the door and not look for any help because they're being told what to do. I know that was my experience in a lot of, early looking for help and stuff like that. So definitely makes sense. What would you say is one of the most common misconceptions about harm reduction, or just misinformation in general about harm reduction that you run into, and how do you typically respond to it?
Well, what I've seen a lot of is more with drug users and with needle exchange. And it's like you're encouraging people to use drugs and people will use more drugs. And no, it's just not reality. Nobody comes to hams because they want to drink more.
Right, right, exactly.
They've already decided they want to make some kind of change, but maybe they don't know what the change is. And, we know very well from experience in needle exchange that when people start making one small change, like using clean needles, it opens them up to deciding to make bigger changes.
Right.
Maybe using fewer drugs, maybe using drugs less often, maybe quitting. Um, well, we have so many myths in the first place. People think, well, drugs are 100% addictive. You use heroin one time and you're automatically addicted for life. You use cocaine one time, you're automatically addicted for life.
Right. Mm,
And we know 2/3 of people that use hard illicit drugs, even hard drugs like heroin and cocaine, 2/3 of people don't become addicted. They are recreational occasional users. Only 1/3 will meet the criteria for addiction. And, with alcohol, it's lower. It's more like a 1/10.
mm,
The reason for that has a lot more to do with the legal status than any chemical properties or physical properties in the brain.
mm.
I mean, how many people are there that drink one or two drinks a year? Huge numbers. Probably half of people that drink alcohol, uh, they drink once or twice a year and have one drink when they drink.
Right. Rarely ever get drunk. Yeah.
Well, they rarely ever drink at all. They don't really
Yeah.
like it's not really any interest to them.
Right. Makes sense. So, and how do you typically respond when people talk about, like, you kind of touched on it a little bit already, of like you're just uh persuading people or helping people to stay in their addiction or continued self-harm. Like, I hear a lot, there's no safe amount of alcohol. There's no amount of alcohol that's considered safe. Even a small amount can, really impact your health. And how do you typically respond when you hear things like that?
Well, there's no safe amount of driving a car either. Every time you go out and drive a car, you're putting your life and other people's lives in danger.
Mm,
There's no safe amount of leaving your house. There's no safe amount of eating pork chops. If you want to maximize your lifespan, you're going to basically have to live in a padded room, never leave, and eat gruel all your life, and you're going to be miserable. There's an old joke that a man goes to a doctor and says, "How do I live to be 100 years old?" The doctor says, "Okay, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, never have sex, and don't eat meat." And the guy says to the doctor, "Well, if I do all those things, will I live to be 100?" And the doctor says, "Well, not necessarily, but it will sure as hell seem that way."
that's great. Just remove all the fun from life, and you'll be all good. That's great. So what is the you touched on it a little bit, like, of, there's a non-prescriptiveness to hams and stuff, and it doesn't necessarily matter what your goal is, as long as you're just trying to make a healthier choice. Is there a specific hams model? Is there a process to the hams support groups or anything like that? A process of recovery or anything like that? What does it really look like, if there is one?
Yeah, we do have a program. And it is in the book. The book is called How to Change Your Drinking, a Harm Reduction Guide to Alcohol, available on Amazon, elsewhere as well, but we get bigger royalties if you buy from Amazon. So it
Awesome.
was published through Amazon. Nobody would touch it. When I brought it out in 2010,
Uh-huh.
harm reduction for alcohol. We never heard of that before. No. Of course, you never heard of it before. I invented it, basically, but I didn't entirely invent it out of whole cloth. And
Right.
Pat Denning, if you're familiar with Pat Denning, who wrote Over the Influence and Harm Reduction Psychotherapy, and founded the Harm Reduction Therapy Center in San Francisco and Oakland. Um, yeah, her books, uh, they're called Harm Reduction Guides to Drugs and Alcohol. And but about 90% of the focus is on drugs and about
Mhm.
10% on alcohol. It's one of those things I said, well, there are a lot of people that are going to pick up Pat Denning's book and they're going to see things about injecting heroin and shooting cocaine and boofing. Uh, uh, if people don't know what boofing is, it is inserting drugs into your anus.
Right.
Uh, and they're going to read this and they're going to say, but I just drink alcohol. I can't relate to this.
Mm.
So I said, somebody needs to write a book that just does alcohol. It's not going to scare off all these drinkers who don't have any experience with other substances.
Okay.
I said, yeah, and I'll write that book. But a lot of the basic framework is taken out of Pat Denning's book, who had already developed harm reduction psychotherapy in San Francisco. And so, it's not made up out of whole cloth, but I just said, okay, we'll focus just on the alcohol aspect because there's a lot of people that drink that don't do other drugs.
Right.
Um, so HAMS has 17 elements, and we call them elements and not steps
Mm.
because they are all optional. They can be done in any order. And if you do one and you solve your problem, you're done with. You don't have to do the rest.
Right. Nice.
So, yeah, it's very in keeping with the harm reduction ideology. So, yeah, 17 elements, and some of them include charting your drinks, keeping a drinking diary. I had so many drinks yesterday. Um, I post a drink count in the Facebook group online every day, but that's one of the elements. If you don't want to do it publicly online, you can do it for yourself. Get a spreadsheet, whatever. Do it on a calendar, paper calendar, whatever works for you. But tracking is a useful tool that many people find helpful to reduce alcohol. People also use it for food. They keep a food diary and makes you aware of what you're eating or what you're drinking. And when you're aware, you automatically drink less. This is an interesting story now. Back in the 1970s, Mark and Linda Sobel were doing some research on moderate drinking and drink reduction. And they said, well, we need a tool to track what people are drinking. So we'll have them write down their number of drinks every day on a calendar. And what they found out was when people started writing down their numbers, they weren't told to reduce, they weren't
Mhm.
told to change. This was preliminary to the experiment. We're going to get a baseline for these
Right.
people of how much they drink. And when people started writing down their numbers, they started reducing without being told
Right.
to
Yeah. Just
reduce.
naturally seeing that number, you kind of want it to be smaller, I guess. Yeah.
It just makes you aware of what you're
Right.
doing.
Hmm.
Um, it's also one of the basic things about the Sinclair method, which I'll explain very briefly. With the Sinclair method, you take a naltrexone pill 1 hour before drinking alcohol. And naltrexone blocks opioid receptors and reduces the reward from alcohol. Now, they ran some huge trials of this in Europe a few years ago, and placebo controlled trials. So half the group got the placebo and half got the naltrexone. And the interesting thing they found was the placebo group had these gigantic reductions in alcohol.
Mm.
Both groups did.
Right.
The naltrexone group and the placebo group both got huge reductions. And what happens if you always take a pill an hour before you drink? Suddenly you're very mindful of when you're drinking. It's
Right.
totally, you're not just automatically drinking anymore. So in one trial, at least, there was no statistical difference between the two groups because
Interesting.
they both reduced so much.
Right.
Anytime you become aware of what you're doing, it changes how you do it.
That's super interesting. Have there been other studies that show a significant difference between the placebo group and the naltrexone group, or is it?
Yeah, yeah. There were three big trials, and they kind of broke down into sub trials because they were different countries. But yeah, I think at least two or more had significant differences, but the differences were still small
Mm,
because all groups had giant reductions, which just shows you
really interesting. Yeah.
the
Uh,
value of mindfulness.
right. That's awesome.
Just going to say a few more things about the HAMS program, I think, and the 17 elements. One was drink counting. Another is cost benefit analysis,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
which, of course, Smart Recovery does that one too.
Yeah.
That's an old technique, it's been around since the 1960s at least, and very commonly used, a very well-established technique. Get out 4 sheets of paper, write down the pros of your current behavior, the cons of your current behavior, the pros of the change you want to make, the cons of the change you want to make. Our other elements include praise yourself for every success. Um, and if you slip up, get right back on the horse. Don't beat yourself up.
Right.
All this comes right out of Alan Marlat's relapse prevention research that he published in the 1980s, and currently it's in use a lot. So it's very well established. Yeah, the more you beat yourself up and say, "Oh, I'm a terrible person. I'm relapsed. I'm horrible. I lost all my time. I,"
Right.
and you make yourself so miserable, you want to drink more.
You're more likely to just go back to it. It's kind of that negative self-fulfilling prophecy.
So it's best not to beat yourself up, not to dwell, and I just get right back into the swim of things, of working on where you want to be, and don't dwell on your failings. You don't even call them failings. I slipped up. Okay, now back to work, back to the process.
Right.
And we have a big harm reduction toolbox is one of the elements with many different things you might want to try, such as naltrexone, such as Sinclair method. And there we talk about rational emotive behavioral therapy,
Awesome.
tool, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy.
Right. Yep.
So we give a little discussion of each of them and refer people to some further readings if they want to go more in depth. David Burns has a book called Feeling Good, which is a really good self-help manual for CBT.
Okay.
Um, and I forgot what book I referred people to for our REBT. But yeah, we give the basics. Okay, here's how to do the ABC, the activating event,
Right.
the belief, and the consequent action. We give a little thumbnail sketch of how this works and how you can use it. So we use a lot of evidence-based tools. We offer a lot of evidence-based tools that you can use if you want to use them.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love hearing about, incorporating the REBT and, more general cognitive behavioral therapy stuff. When I got exposed to REBT, I remember kind of being like, and especially going to, professional REBT. Like my mentor is someone who was trained by Albert Ellis, who created REBT. And so really taking a deep dive into, the precision of the ABC method, I was like, where has this been all my life? So it kind of felt like, I was like, how has this been so under the radar for so long that, it's right out, it's been around since the 50s, but I don't know. It really made a big difference in my life. So love that you guys have those tools available to anyone who's looking.
Yeah, we basically borrowed, so to speak, stole every good idea from every other program that was out there. So we took a lot of stuff from Smart and from other harm reduction programs, and just anything that was good, we just incorporated it. One of the other pages I put up was the alcohol taper page, which there was nothing on that when I put it up, which is almost 20 years ago now. So 18 years ago, I put up, okay, this is how to taper off alcohol. If you're going to have withdrawal and you don't want to go into detox or see a doctor, here is the method that works. Reduce 2 standard drinks per day is the basic formula. And nobody else had that. There was nothing on the internet for at least 10 years except our page. We had the only taper page that brought in a lot of people. Then everybody plagiarized us. And Google decided, well, we're going to rank big companies with billions of dollars much higher than little people. And so, and now we lost all our search rank on that. But yeah, that was another page that was really helpful in getting people to come to the website and find us.
Alrighty. Cool. Yeah, makes sense. That's surprising that there wasn't any. I mean, I guess, it's people want to immediately just tell people to, go to the emergency room. But if people are choosing not to do that, well, then what are their options? So I think that's a good resource out there.
Well, you got to go back to the recovery industry, and which is all based on the 12 steps of AA. And step 1 is you are powerless.
Right. Mm-hmm.
If you're powerless, you can't taper. You have no control. You take 1 drink and you're off to the races,
right,
as they like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the reality. That's not the experience of so many people. I mean, I wrote this because I knew a guy that would taper.
Mm-hmm.
He would once or twice a year drink to the point that he would have withdrawals, and he would taper himself off. And I said, well, yeah, this is something that people actually do, and nobody's talking about it because everybody's been convinced they are powerless. I mean, This is, rehabs. It's bizarre that they plagiarized this, because they're going to tell people the exact opposite as soon as they get into rehab.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a almost oxymoron type of thinking. You're saying one thing beforehand, or kind of conditioning people to think that they're powerless, but then showing them all the ways that they can actually make differences and take control of their life, but still under the premise that they're powerless. It's a kind of confusing model, honestly.
Yeah, it's bizarre because, I mean, for them, for many years, the whole trick to get people in was, well, you can't taper and you're going to die if you don't go into detox. So you have to go into detox. And then they got their hooks into them. And then we can get our hands on your bank account, which is what we're really interested in, is we want to take all your money.
Yeah, it's a big industry. Well, cool. If you're comfortable sharing, and I know a little bit already because I'm part of the Facebook group, and you already alluded to it a bit about your daily drink count post and stuff like that. But if you're comfortable sharing, what does your relationship with alcohol look like today compared to many years ago?
Well, I'm getting old now these days. I just had my 67th birthday. Now I'm drinking about twice a month. I used to drink once a week.
Mm-hmm.
I still drink a fifth of whiskey when I drink, so 17 drinks. But it's just, man, it's just too much to drink that weekly anymore.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the things that I loved about your group was those daily drink counts, because it's it's still pretty stark contrast between a lot of other groups. It's like, what's your drink count for today? Mine's 0. What's your drink count? And then once a week, seeing that number 17, I was like, whoa. But I was like, hey, if that works for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, 20 years ago, it's more like twice a week. Yeah, I would have 2 drinking days a week, and I could deal with that. Then I got older, and it's like, yeah, that's too much. I mean, it's not so much a conscious decision. It's like, man, just don't feel in the mood for it anymore.
Right. And that's kind of goes right in line with harm reduction. You just you're gradually making small changes. So whatever works for you at one time might not work for you later on. And, so that's awesome. That makes sense. So how can people get involved with HAMS? If anybody's looking for help or just is looking for resources, just wants to get involved with the organization in general, what's the best way to get involved?
Well, the first thing you can do is go to the website, which is hams.cc. It's not .com, it's .cc, because .cc's are cheap.
Okay.
And the others were not available for sale anyway. The .org and the .com aren't for sale. So hams.cc, go to the website. It's full of free information and has links to the Facebook group and the forum. So those are the 2 support groups we have going right now. If you join the Facebook group, we are also doing Zoom meetings on a regular basis, 3 times a week. Currently, we do Zoom meetings in real time. We haven't put those on the website yet because we were a little worried about trolls coming in and and things. Yeah, we're still thinking about putting the Zoom meetings on the website, but we haven't done it yet. So if you're in the Facebook group, they will be announced an hour before they start every time, So they're announced, every time we're going to have a Zoom meeting, the host just announces it ahead of time so everybody can find it. But you can get to the Zoom meetings through Facebook.
Okay. And yeah, speaking of your website, kind of wanted to give you some props as well, because this had to be about 5.5 years ago, around that. I'm not someone who I've done my own experiments with moderating alcohol and stuff and had mild success. But at the end of the day, I just kind of was like, I don't think the moderate drinking is really what I'm looking for. I think it's not an experience that I'm after. But one thing that has been helpful in my recovery is occasionally, or even sometimes not occasionally, pretty often, using cannabis in my recovery. And I remember I was looking for a support group in the middle of the pandemic, and I was Googling, people who quit drinking but keep, smoking, whatever, just trying to find something. I don't know if you're familiar with Green Recovery and Sobriety Support. It's GRASS is what the acronym. But it's, for people who are in recovery or have cut back on, basically anyone who finds cannabis as beneficial to their mental health, or, to help with addiction or something like that. But yeah, it was through your website actually that I had found the original group that kind of got the ball rolling on all that. So I wanted to it kind of feels like a little bit of a full circle moment here. So but
that was I was trying to draw people to HAMS. So I was writing content. I was trying to get hits on the website. That's what I'm talking about. So I was trying to write new pages every day. Back 17, 18 years ago, I was writing new web pages every day, putting out as much content as I could think of. And I was trying to put up all the content that nobody else had.
It worked in that case, yeah, because I couldn't find anything about support groups surrounding that. It was always, sending me to Marijuana Anonymous or something, which is for people who are trying to quit, smoking and stuff. So, that was pretty helpful for me. So.
Yeah, I saw that. If you Googled marijuana maintenance or cannabis substitution or one of those, you got these horror sites that it never works. This is a great term to put on my website to have people look for. And well, it's not just that it was for search engine optimization, but it's because I knew plenty of people that
Right.
did it successfully.
Mm-hmm.
And I checked out the research on it. And, there's research going back, I think, to the 1970s is when Todd McCudia started publishing research on this. And, Amanda Ryman also studied this in depth, cannabis substitution for various substances, including opioids and alcohol. And HAMS has a podcast too, which we are doing new episodes for.
Okay, cool. That was actually my next question to see, are there any books or talks, videos, social media handles, or other podcasts that you'd like to plug?
Well, mainly it's our book, How to Change Your Drinking, which I already talked about. But if you go to the website, there's a link to the podcast, which I interviewed a lot of really great people when I was doing that actively. So there's a lot of really wonderful stuff there.
Cool.
Because I interviewed great people. And Amanda Ryman was one of them. We talked about the cannabis substitution and all the research on that. Stanton Peele is on there.
That's awesome. I'm hoping to talk to him soon as well. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I've got Tom Horvath, got a lot of people from needle exchange programs, so all over the place. And so there's a lot of good info on that podcast. I just got too busy with school and things to keep doing new episodes, so I haven't done a new episode in a long, long time.
Gotcha.
But the ones that are up there have great info on them from many great people.
I'll have to take a deeper dive myself.
Yeah. I mean, some people were saying, it's a good podcast I can listen to while I'm mowing the lawn. And I said, yes, listen to ours.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks, Kenneth. I really appreciate you joining me today. I think the work that you've been doing for many years is, invaluable. Can't put a price on it. We want to keep spreading the word and just blasting this out to as many people as we can, because unfortunately, not a lot of people believe that there are other options out there, and just want to continue to make a difference and let people know that there are plenty of other options out there, and you do have more power than you think. So, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you doing this with me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Kenneth.
This has been an episode of the Rational Harm Reduction podcast. If you're interested in volunteering to participate and come on as a guest to talk about any mental health issues that you're currently struggling with or would like some feedback or guidance on, you can find us on Facebook at Rational Harm Reduction. Or you can email us at rationalharmreduction@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening, and stay safe out there.